I'm excited today to be with Dr. Joe Welty and Teresa Shroyer. They have come to an important part of their careers, and we wanted to take this opportunity to capture some of the highlights from all of the things that they have done for our patients and for our community. I'm Dave Schreiner, the president and CEO. Teresa, Dr. Welty, welcome.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
So what we want to do is we want to walk through a little bit of your journey, and we're going to talk to Dr. Welty to begin with, and then Teresa, we want to bring you in and have you tell some stories as well. So Dr. Welty, I know from the conversations that you and I have had over the years, your mother had a tremendous influence on your personal and professional career. Can you tell us a little bit about growing up in Amboy, one of KSB's communities?
I sure can, Dave. So I grew up without a father. My dad actually passed away when my mom was pregnant with me, and she had 5 other children at home, age 10 and under. My mother was a nurse and worked for Dr. Spinader, a family physician who worked in Amboy, Sublette, and Mendota, Illinois. And actually, Wayne at some point also had time that he worked out of KSB as well. But I grew up watching her be picked up in front of our house by an ambulance, and off they would go. Have vivid memories of that. Often spent afternoons after kindergarten at the doctor's office because there weren't a lot of daycares back in that day. Also spent a lot of time with my grandma at that time. But from very early on, I was around a physician's office, and it kind of spiked my curiosity about all these instruments and things that I saw, and evolved into seeing the impact that my mother had on people's lives with what she was doing with the care that she delivered.
And Dr. Welty, did you always think medicine for as long as you can remember, even back into those days?
I do, Dave. I can't remember, when I had the epiphany that this is what I'm going to do specifically, but certainly back into junior high age days, that was what I was focused on going towards. I don't remember ever considering anything else until I got my first B in college in my Calculus 1 class, and thinking that that would doom me into being able to get into medical school. So I better start thinking of other options.
Coming from someone who celebrated B's, I can relate with you. Dr. Welty, I also love to hear about your brothers and sisters. You have a very successful family.
Yes, they've all done quite well. My brother is a retired university president, his last position being at Fresno State University out in California. He's the oldest in the family. I'm the youngest. And then there are 4 girls in between us. My oldest sister, Barb, retired from the Kaiser Permanente healthcare system out in the Oregon and California area, and then returned to work, and currently is actively working with a indigent care clinic out in the Portland area. Next sister is my sister Sue, who we always say is the smartest among all of us. She taught foreign language in grade school and junior high level, and was able to speak a number of languages. I can't even remember what the number is at the present time. My sister Ruth was an executive secretary for a number of years for a large hardware firm out of the Chicago area. She and her husband have actually retired back to the Dixon area, as has my sister Sue and her husband. My sister Becky also worked in healthcare. She was involved in health information for a number of years for Sutter Health, which is a large healthcare organization in Northern California. Her last years there, she was heavily involved in their quality departments as well. So yeah, they've all done pretty well. And when their brother Joe got into medical school, they all said, "So what?"
Well, I think it's fascinating that, we started with the idea of the influence that your mother had, and 3 of the 5 went into healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I've heard stories about your mom, and I think that she would have, at a minimum, been considered a nurse practitioner in today's environment.
She functioned very much that way, Dave, before there were actually formally nurse practitioners. And it was much needed at that time. Dr. Spinader was covering several communities So he relied fairly heavily, as I have, on his nursing staff from his office to help out with a lot of things.
So after high school, you became a fighting Scot.
Went to Monmouth College in Monmouth, Illinois. Um, Monmouth had a reputation for strong science departments, and I knew I wanted to go to a smaller college. So I got accepted down there, completed my chemistry major down there, and then from there was accepted into University of Illinois School of Medicine, where I got my MD.
Can we go back to Monmouth for just a second, Dr. Welty?
Sure.
So you also participated in sports?
I did. One of the reasons that I was interested in a smaller school, Dave, was just had an interest through high school and on into college about participating in other activities besides academics. And Monmouth certainly offered me that opportunity. I was able to be involved not only in athletics, but student government. Actually edited a yearbook one year along with a friend. So a lot of opportunities there to experience other things. One of the things I tell a lot of people about my Monmouth experience was one of the best classes that I ever took in all my years was a Greek and Latin word roots class that I took out of a requirement, actually. And when I got to medical school and started an anatomy class, everything made sense because all the terms were derived from Greek and Latin word roots. So it's funny how you get things that you think you're doing just as a requirement to get out of the way, and they turn out to be some of the better parts of your education.
That's really a cool story. Dr. Welty, your athletic career continues to this day. And I'm just curious what impact that has had on your outlook as a physician as you counsel your patients.
Well, Dave, as you know, I've always remained pretty active. For me, it's a part of my lifestyle, and it just makes me feel more energetic. It makes me feel more focused when I come to work in the morning, having done exercise early on. It certainly impacts on my ability to counsel my patients about staying physically active. The classic line that I run into over the years is, well, I just don't have time for it. And I will pause and give them a moment. And oftentimes people might be sitting in a room where I have posters of previous marathons that I've run. And without me saying anything, they'll answer back, oh yeah, I guess I probably do have time, because they realize that I put in the time to do it as well. So I think leading by example with that is probably the summary I would put on that question.
I know some of the best therapy sessions I've ever had is running more than 10 miles with you on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And we did many of those, my friend.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you also had the ability to watch your three boys go through the same undergraduate school as you did, as well as being really, really successful in track.
Yeah. So all three of my sons chose to go to Monmouth College, totally not pushed by his father. They discovered it for themselves. The two younger ones followed their older brother there. All three of them were involved in very successful track and field program there. And the two bookends, Anthony and Jonathan, also participated in cross country while they were there. It was really fun to reconnect with the college during their years there. And Jonathan, our youngest, remained there and is the head coach of the cross country program there currently.
Well, with Jonathan and Anthony, I get it. I don't know how you got a sprinter in the middle and Chris.
Yeah, I think he comes from his mother's side. I think she got the fast twitch genes is where that middle one came from.
So I interrupted you. Tell us about medical school and the application process and how you decided where you wanted to go.
Sure. So Dave, like I think a lot of students do coming out of college, you kind of fire the shotgun and apply to multiple schools because there's no guarantee that you're going to get in where you want to go. I was fortunate to have been accepted at two of the schools that I applied to, University of Illinois and Rush University program. The Rush program, actually the acceptance I got there was going to have been a first-year experience in Grinnell, Iowa, at Grinnell College, which I believe they may still have today. Unfortunately, Grinnell was a bitter rival of Monmouth, so I couldn't imagine going there for medical school. But really, the real reason was my wife, we got married 2 weeks before I started medical school, had a teaching job in the Chicago area. So the University of Illinois looked like the right choice at that time, and we locked into that, and we're in Chicago for the next 4 years for medical school, followed by suburban Chicago and Berwyn, Illinois for my family medicine residency.
And Jean's family is from the Chicago area, right, Dr. Welty?
They are.
So
We actually lived in a basement apartment at my mother-in-law's for my 4 years of medical school. Allowed us to cut a little corners on the finances by doing that. And fortunately, we're able to get through that time period without a lot of indebtedness, as I know a lot of students end up with.
And I'm guessing in a residency program, you weren't home a whole lot.
That's true. We were in that time period on call every third night, which meant being in the hospital for a period of about 36 hours straight, because you would do your call night and then you'd have your full work day after that. So about every third night I would disappear, and Jean would have her apartment to herself. But I think we're both looking forward to getting a little more time together now that we're starting to end some of that night work.
So Dr. Welty, when we look at family medicine, you're the role model for that. Did you consider any other residencies?
Dave, I didn't. I've always had a broad interest in all the different disciplines. Typically in medical school, you'll get experience in internal medicine, surgery, obstetrics and gynecology, psychiatry. And the major disciplines is when you start to make some of those decisions as to which direction you're going to hold. Pediatrics, I should add in there as well. All interested me so much that family medicine just seemed to make the most sense. And I think growing up watching family medicine be actively practiced, I was very drawn to that specialty too. It just demonstrated to me how you could get to know families well, how that impacted on their care. So yeah, I never really considered a different specialty.
So then as we move towards the end of your residency, you come to the point where you have to decide where you want to practice. You have a wonderful story that I hope you'll share as part of this. I know what I mean, but how did you narrow down that circle in deciding where Dr. Welty would begin his career?
Sure. So began to look at opportunities that were in more Dixon-like towns. I felt a desire to go back to a more rural type setting for my practice, and was looking at a variety of settings in southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois. Actually looked at one suburban practice, a pair of brothers from my residency program that had set up practice and had asked me to take a look at their practice, and decided that the suburban area just wasn't where we wanted to raise our family. At the time that I was interviewing, there was an administrator by the name of Mike Maynard who was here in Dixon, and Mike found out that I was in that phase of my career, started bugging my mother just incessantly about getting me out here to interview. And I finally decided, okay, I'll come and talk to this guy, tell him no, so he'll leave my mom alone. I did. I liked the people that I met and gave it further consideration. The only stepping stone that I had to go through is I hadn't met the other family physician in town at that time, Dr. Greg Selgestead, and requested to do that. So we arranged a Saturday, and I was sitting in Mr. Maynard's office. Dr. Selgestead walked in, looked at me, and he said, "We don't need another family physician in Dixon," and turned around and walked out of the office. And Greg and I have been great friends ever since that day. So respect him totally as a colleague. In fact, he was our family physician for all the years until he retired here just a little while ago.
And so just a couple of questions. What year was that, Dr. Welty?
I started practice here in July of 1985.
Okay. And you've been continuously in the Dixon area since that time?
Yep. Yep, that was originally with a medical group called Medical Arts Clinic. We went through some transitions, and then starting in 2004, became a member of the KSB Medical Group. But I've been here in Dixon for my entire practice career.
Did you say that you were the second family medicine physician in town?
Yeah, at that time, I don't believe there was really much in the way of family medicine. Dr. Mizrobian was up in Oregon. Dr. Appenheimer returned back to the area. He had been in the area, had gone out to University of Iowa for teaching in their family medicine program. And then he came back to the area soon thereafter. I don't remember exactly what year that was that Tim returned to the area. But we had a fairly small family medicine influence here in the area when I started out.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the difference for you between being in private practice versus hospital employment? And you were very early on in the development of the KSB Medical Group.
Yeah, Dave. So, the difference is when I was with the medical arts group, we were very much a part of the business operations of that. And in fact, it occupied a lot more of my time that I really wish it had. But there were those pressures that you felt pretty constantly. And not that we don't pay attention to those as a employed physician from the hospital group, but it feels like somebody else is taking care of that. I think that all along, I have always felt embraced by the hospital, and it just felt like a natural when that opportunity presented itself to join the hospital group at that time. We were a multi-specialty group, which we are as a KSB medical group as well. So that all felt very seamless to do when that opportunity came along.
Great. And it's been a wonderful partnership for all those years.
Indeed, it has. It's been some of the most enjoyable years of my practice.
So what do you think if we bring Teresa in? Does that sound okay?
Absolutely.
Teresa, welcome back. Tell us a little bit about your career and how you got started and how you met Dr. Welty.
Well, I actually started at KSB back in high school. I worked in the cafeteria my senior year in high school. And from there, I went to work out at the state school at the time, put some time in there and decided I wanted to go into nursing and went to Sauk, graduated from Sauk. And when I graduated, I started at KSB in ICU. And worked there until after my first child was born.
Okay. So what year did you join Dr. Welty?
So it was a little while. I, from ICU, went to emergency room, worked a couple years there. And then I think 1982 or so, I joined medical arts as well. And I worked for Dr. Roger Hill, who was here at the time in internal medicine. Worked there for him a few years and then joined Dr. Welty, and I believe it was January 1986.
I've got to believe, Teresa, that hospital experience has been very helpful for you in your role working with physicians.
I totally agree. I think every nurse coming out of training should have a couple years hospital experience. I think that's very good for them.
So was Dr. Welty a tough interviewer? Do you remember?
I don't quite remember. I think I kind of just stepped into the position because he was getting busy and needed another nurse. Colleen Tofty, who was here at the time, started out with him, and he got busy right away and needed another body, and so I joined him and started full time then down there with him.
So Dave, she's being way too modest. Way
So
too modest. We have conversations all the time in our board meetings about local talent and trying to farm the local talent. I think that Teresa is a classic example of how our healthcare in this community has benefited from farming the local talent.
Oh, finding those people that are born and raised here and stay at home. Oh, what a blessing, right? So what do you remember, Dr. Welty, from those early years and what became a very successful partnership between you and Teresa?
I think
well, as Teresa said, go ahead.
I think communication between the two of us has been the major factor in everything. I think we've been forthcoming with everything that has gone on in our practice and in our lives and family life. And I think that's been a big part of our success.
I would totally agree with that. I've said for many years that I could have never done what I've done while I'm here without the support that I've had. And that's absolutely included that support in my office, in the hospital, at home. And Teresa's been a key part of that for most of the entire time, except for the first 6 months that I was here.
Well, Dr. Welty, I'd like to ask a couple of questions about that. So when you think about that entire career, having Teresa there at your side, how do the patients become impacted by that continuity?
Well, Dave, I got to tell you this. I think people that are upset about my retirement, there are at least twice that many from our practice that are upset about Teresa's retirement. You know, we talk about medical homes now with practicing family medicine. And I think for our patients for a long time, that's kind of felt like a home because it's familiar faces that they come to when they're coming in.
Right. And that patient knowledge, even from a clinical perspective, right, Teresa, it changes everything, doesn't it?
It sure does. I agree.
Right.
Dave, she was also, being a lifelong Dixon resident, often able to give me insights into patients' lives that I would have never learned or known about had I not had somebody that was familiar with the town of Dixon and many of the people that live here.
Right. Can both of you tell me a little bit about taking care of generational families? I know I'm going off script a little bit here, but it seems like the impact that you have had in seeing kids become adults, perhaps become parents, that's got to be a very rewarding feeling.
It sure does. And it impacted my family personally because Dr. Welty's taken care of 4 generations of
Wow.
my family. So it's truly family practice.
Wow. 4 generations, Teresa. That's amazing. Dr.
Yeah.
Welty.
And not only mine, but we have, I think, several families that we've had 4 generations.
Yeah. We have one 5-generation family that we've had in the practice, Dave, too. It's interesting that you asked that question. Just had a child in for a 4-year-old checkup today, and her mother reminded me that I took care of her when she was a child.
Wow, that's got to be incredibly rewarding. Congratulations. Dr. Welty, a time that was exciting and not necessarily a positive is when your son became ill as part of a community-wide health event. Would you be willing to share that story? And then Teresa, I'd like to hear your thoughts about that period of time as well. I think it speaks volumes to what our healthcare community is here in the Dixon area.
I sure would be willing to share it, Dave. Our youngest son, Jonathan, when he was 5 and in kindergarten, became ill with meningococcemia, which is a serious bacterial infection, is often fatal. In fact, at that time when Jonathan had it, the statistics were 50% mortality rate associated with it. He and 2 other students from his class came down with this at that time. Jonathan was fortunate to be cared for his entire 2 weeks here at KSB. The other students that were involved with that were transferred out to outside facilities. My experience with it was he'd had a fussy night. It was President's Day in February, and I had taken the day out of the office to spend some time with the kids since they were off school that day. I'd come in to do hospital rounds, and when I got back home, my wife pointed out these blue bruise-like spots that he had on his legs that were very painful for him. I had never seen a case of meningococcemia except in textbooks, and recognized it right away, scooped him up, brought him in to see Dr. Selgestead, who hospitalized him right away. Probably within an hour of me scooping him up at home, he had his first dose of IV antibiotics going. And then subsequently, parents of the other 2 students were in the hallways in our pediatric department and describing very similar things with their sons. One of them became more critically ill than the other, both critical enough that they were transferred to Rockford initially. The one that was more critically ill eventually ended up at Milwaukee Children's Hospital, and actually ended up at a point where all life-sustaining measures were going to be stopped. His mother got into bed with him. He moved for the first time in a number of days, and she said, "Wait a minute." To this day, if that young man walked in, excuse me, this always gets me a little emotional. He is a healthy young man who would fill the doorway when he walked into a room. It was nothing less than a miracle, Dave, and to me truly demonstrates not only the power of our healthcare, but the power of our faith and prayer as well. On the community-wide side, we immunized over 3,000 students for meningococcemia. This was before the time that that vaccine was done routinely in that age group. It is now done routinely in the younger age group. So we hopefully don't have to see much of that horrible disease any longer. We had the Centers for Disease Control, had workers that came here to help coordinate some of that immunization process. In fact, after about 48 hours of no sleep, sitting by my son's bedside, I had a rather heated exchange with someone from the CDC who was on a teleconference call with us. I happened to have been on the health department board at that time, and this expert was hemming and hawing quite a bit. And I finally said, "If you can't tell us what to do, get somebody else on the phone that can." I was greeted by a rather pompous, "I'm an expert in this field." I told the gentleman to please act like that expert then, and we subsequently got the recommendations that we needed at that time. Guess it takes a kind of a irritable, sleep-deprived parent to get that out of people sometimes.
Teresa, what do you remember from that situation?
Well, as Doctor said, I see the personal and the professional side and the compassion. And I remember being just as nervous in the office and praying for him and his son just as much as everybody else in the community did.
Dr. Welty, I was a young administrator, and I remember sitting in the boardroom with you when we were in contact with the Center for Disease Control. And your repeated comment was, "We've got to take care of these kids. What are the things we have to do to take care of these kids?" And I bring that up because it seems like there's some commonality with the situation that our country and our world is going through today with COVID.
Absolutely, Dave. And I think that our rapid response to that and our ongoing response to it is just emblematic of what our community does around these kinds of things. I remember very clearly during that time as well, really confirming that Dixon is the right place for me to live, because our other two sons, of course, were school age at that time, and people came out of the woodwork saying, "You guys need to be at the hospital. We'll take care of them." And they did. And I've seen that so many other times, not necessarily with our own family, but in other families that are in crises around healthcare. How people just come out of the woodwork and help one another. I think we experience that so often here that we don't realize how unique that is to Dixon, and it doesn't happen everywhere else.
So let's talk about community for just a second, Dr. Welty. And two things that come to mind is you served for, I don't know how many years for the Lee County Health Department. It was many. Maybe you can fill in the blank.
I don't remember the exact number. I mean, I got involved with that pretty early on here. And it was just 2 or 3 years ago that I stepped down from that post.
So easily well over 25 years.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then also you served as the physician for Newman Central Catholic football, and really not just football, but all sports programs. And I know you played an instrumental role over there as well. When you're raising a family and being a husband and running a full practice and seeing your own patients in the hospital, how do you find time for those types of activities, and why?
Dave, my response to that is I don't know how you don't find time. when a community supports you as well as this community has me all these years, I owe it back. And I hope that I've set that example for my children, for my grandchildren, because our communities don't operate without that. And it's just part of what you do. I guess I was raised that way, of seeing what my mother did, and it just felt like it's what you do. It's not a question of should I or shouldn't I for me.
Can you tell me about Dr. Welty as a teacher?
As a teacher,
Through the residency program, through the students that have come your way, and maybe
yeah,
through what I think will be fun to watch is that legacy of future physicians that you've had an impact on.
yeah. Dave, my classic sentence, particularly to our residents current day, is you teach me about the new stuff and I'll try to teach you how to be a doctor. So I think what my focus is as a teacher, beyond the facts and the book learning stuff, has always been to try to set an example of how to be a professional, how to be actively involved in your community, how to be personal and not be afraid to expose some of your personal self to your patients, because that means a lot to them.
Teresa, how did Dr. Welty's involvement in everything impact the office and impact your role there?
Chaos.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
How did Dr. Welty's role in all of those things between the residency program and teaching students and Newman football and how did that impact the office? Because you're the gatekeeper, right?
I am, but it was kept very well by him. He manages and balance everything very well. And again, the communication with keeping our schedule straight and keeping him where he needed to be at the right time.
Well, Dr. Welty, I know how humble you are, and this question is probably a little bit tough, but do you have any idea how many people that you feel you have influenced to go into medicine?
I've never put a count on it, Dave. But those that have and have come back to tell me that, it really touches my heart. A couple of experiences I've had just very recently along that line. Dr. Joe Blessman, who is in his second year of family medicine residency at the Mayo Clinic, went to his graduation, which he had invited me to from medical school. And there is a process called hooding that happens at those commencement exercises. And after the commencement was over, Joe came up to me and told me that he had requested that I hood him, but their policy at Southern Illinois University School of Medicine was that you had to be a family member, which he argued because his sister is actually married to my son. He argued that made me a family member, but they said, no, blood relative. So I was not able to do that. But the fact that he thought to have me do that was truly impactful. And then just recently, due to the COVID pandemic, Mr. Ray Nicewander, whose son Brandon is in his residency in psychiatry out at University of Iowa, Brandon lost the opportunity to go through his commencement exercise because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the restrictions. So the Nicewander family set up a very well done, socially distanced event for just their immediate family at their riverfront home. And Brandon invited me to hood him at that ceremony. And I know you got to witness that as you were there as a speaker as well, Dave. And again, the impact that has and how that touches my heart, that I had any little bit of influencing those young people to go into medicine, and then to imagine all the lives that they're going to touch. It's hard to put into words.
Well, I know that list of people is very long, Dr. Welty, so thank you so much for that. Teaching is an important part of our organizational DNA, at KSB Hospital, and you certainly led that. And we'll have more to come about that in just a couple of minutes. Do the two of you have a favorite story or favorite stories that you would like to share over the years?
Oh, boy. You go first. I can't.
Yeah, thanks. I thought you'd toss the ball back this way. You know, Dave, I can't say any one comes to mind, but if I had advice for any family physician that was just starting into practice, would be write the book. We often have said, Teresa and I, we should have written the book. We should have put it down in a book. And we didn't, but boy, there's been some unique experiences over the years.
Sure, that's
I totally agree.
The number of people that you have had in your office over that time period is relatively small. Is that true? I mean, it's been a very steady group, right?
Yeah, so I've been tremendously blessed that way. Started off with Colleen Tofty, who was with me for about a year, I believe. And then Colleen's husband received a promotion that took them to the state of Ohio. Teresa had started roughly 5 or 6 months before that. And then when Colleen left, Barb Love joined me. We sadly lost Barb to a fight with breast cancer 7 years ago. And around that time when Barb took ill, Andrea Doran, who is a MA, joined our practice and has been with us ever since. So in almost 36 years, I've had a total of 4 staff in my office. And of course, absolutely blessed by all the different floats that have taken part during times where we had other staffing needs. But my core group has been limited to 4 people during that time.
You know, that is absolutely unbelievable when 4 people, some offices have had 4 people this week. And to think that you have had a run like that to both of you, Teresa and Dr. Welty, that says a lot. So congratulations on that.
Well, Dave, it gets to where they're thinking of what you're doing before you realize you're going to think of doing it.
That team, right? That team.
It's just what's made it work.
So Teresa, what are your plans after Dr. Welty retires?
Well, I plan to do a little PRN work still with corporate health. But
you do know
primarily,
you do know that PRN to me means 4 days a week.
oh no, not to me though. I plan on spending time with my husband Rick and doing a little traveling and spending time with my grandchildren who are growing very rapidly, and I want to continue to see them grow and do fun things with them.
Oh, that's wonderful. Congratulations. And thank you so much for everything that you've done for our community and our patients.
Well, thank you.
So Dr. Welty, when does retirement officially start?
January 1 is when it will begin. Dr. Tim Williams will be taking over the practice fully on that date. Tim has been with us since the end of July and just moved very seamlessly into the practice, been very well received, and it's given me a great deal of peace and comfort to see how greatly our patients have accepted him. And he is extremely solid clinically. It's been kind of fun to have him around to talk about cases these last few months. I will be staying on to do some part-time teaching in the residency program. Be doing a couple of half days in the family health center with the residents, and I'm very much looking forward to that. And then, as you know, Dave, I'm going to stay active with a project with succession planning for our providers, which again, few hours a week, but hoping to cut the total hour commitment down a little bit, get a little more time with that wife of mine and those grandkids.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, Dr. Welty, because I know how important Gene is to your practice, to your family, and to your life. Can you share your thoughts on that partnership over the years and being the spouse of a physician?
Yeah. So Dave, we got married 2 weeks before I started medical school. So she has been with me through the entire time and talked me off the cliff more than once. I probably quit medical school about on average once a week during those years. And she would talk me through until get through the next exam, and And here I am today. What I think people often don't think about is when they comment to me about, thank you for all the service you've given to the community. Well, that lady was woken up every time our phone rang during the middle of the night, laid awake for whatever many hours that I was back at the hospital until I was back home again. Many times triaged calls that came to the house or to the front door. More than once served as my assistant when I sutured a neighbor's child up laying on our couch in our front family room. So she has been through the entire deal with me, has been my rock and my support. Never, never, never could have done this without her on board.
And how about those grandkids? What's the over under for one of your grandchildren beating you in a 5K?
Yeah, that's probably this year is my bet. They're getting bigger, they're getting faster, they're getting taller, all that stuff. Yeah, I think it's going to happen real soon.
Well, Dr. Welty, I'm going to come back to you with this question, but I want to start to Teresa. Teresa, do you have anything that you'd like to say to the colleagues that you've worked with at KSB, part of the KSB family over all these years?
I'll tell you, Dave, I've met a lot of people in the years I've been here, and a lot of good friends and close friends that I'm going to miss them terribly, but I'm still going to be around and drop in and see them.
We never let you get very far away. So again, thank you so much for everything that you have done.
Well,
Dr. Welty, I'll throw the same question back at you and also ask if there's anything that you would like to say to your physician colleagues. So both the KSB family as well as your physician colleagues.
Yeah. So I would certainly echo what Teresa said, Dave. But I think when I think about this, it fits in with what I'm going to miss the most about being here day in and day out every day. And that is the opportunity to witness the dedication and the devotion that all our physicians and all our staff and employees give every day to our patients. And, you know, that is everything from those folks that keep our facilities clean and looking bright that I got to see at the wee hours of the morning sometimes, to, you know, our most active physician staff. I can't think of a time that would better show that than what we're going through right now. One of the things that bothered me the most about some of the early media reports on COVID were the overwhelmed healthcare workers that would say, I didn't sign up for this. Now, it may have happened, but I have never once heard anyone in our institution say that. And I'm so proud of them for that. Instead, what they do is they've stepped up, they've changed their positions, they've transitioned into doing jobs different than what they were doing to be sure that everybody was taken care of. And for that, I am eternally grateful for all of them.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate that very much. So to both of you, it's that first day of retirement when you wake up in the morning. What are you looking forward to?
Doing absolutely nothing.
I'm going to come over and knock on your front door and make you start running again is what I'm going to do.
Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Congratulations as your retirement comes up. There aren't enough nice things that I can say about the impact that both of you have had on our organization. Dr. Welty, special thanks for the impact that you have had on our board of directors as you've served in that role and been really the liaison between our board and our physicians, especially, as well as all of our employees. Thank you for the thousands of patients that you've taken care of over the years, and really the impact that both of you have had in the reputation of KSB Hospital. God bless you. We wish you all the best in the years ahead.
Thanks,
Thank
Dave,
you.
and have a most blessed Christmas with your family.
Thank you.